The imperial system for linear measurement, is based on British units and used by the United States. The imperial system is one of the main reasons we need to know those nasty fractions. Let's have a look at the unit and the abbreviation, and again, reference. The smallest unit is the inch, and I look at the inch as the width of 2 fingers. The foot is the next unit, abbreviated FT, and no surprise, the length of an average foot. The next unit is the yard, and you could think of the yard as the height of the doorknob above the ground, or one adult pace, so nice step. And finally, the biggest unit is the mile. And that one's kind of a tough one to think about. You could say about 4 laps around a track, or I like horse racing and 1 lap around a horse track. Here are the conversion factors, which are not nearly as nice as the metric system. There are 12 inches in a foot, 3 feet in a yard, and 1,760 yards in a mile. But the basic idea is the same. When you're going in to the right, you're going to be dividing by these, and when you're going to the left, you're going to be multiplying by these. When we measure with an imperial ruler, which I imagine you've done, again, we have to be careful. They're a bit trickier. Every division on a metric ruler is 1/10 of the unit, so usually imperial and metric ruler has centimeters and each division is a millimeter. Well, here's a blow up of an imperial ruler, and depending on your ruler, you have to be careful about the divisions. In this particular ruler, the smallest divisions are 1/16 of an inch, and again, if you counted all those smallest divisions, there'd be 16 of them, and each one would represent 1/16. Most rulers, though, probably only go down to eighths. If you look at the one you have, or one around class, it's probably an eighths. So there are 8 of those divisions. From here to here is a quarter. If we counted the number of those, there'd be 4, and finally a half. So again, when using an imperial ruler, you really have to be careful about the units. Okay, let's look at an example, and we want to know the width of this heart. We know it is 1 and something, and what we want to know is 1 and what. And if we look at the 1 and what, here's the what right there, we see that we have to figure out, well, how many of those divisions are there and what are they? Well, when we count them, there's 5. And when you look at the scaling between 2 and 3, we see that, well, each one of these is 1/8. So when we look at this heart, we see that it is 1 and, well, there's 5, and each one of those measurements is 1/8. And what this says is we have 1 and 5/8 of an inch. You might see these abbreviations, my little abbreviation right here. This little symbol, a little tick, represents feet, and tick tick represents inch. So an example that you might see somewhere then is 3 feet 4 inches. Okay, so then the second part of today is, given that we know the units and we know what they're all about, what we want to do is then figure out how to convert in between. So here's our first example. Go from how many inches are in 1 mile, and as it says, we're going to use the same basic methods we did last day, except we're going to have to pay extra attention to the conversion factors because they're not simply multiples of 10. So let's go ahead and do the unit line approach to how many inches are in a mile. A mile is big, an inch is small. There's going to be a lot more than one. If we're going to do our number line, we go from inch to feet to yards to miles. And in this particular example, we're going to start here and we're going to finish here. And every time we make a bounce when we go in this direction, that's a multiplication. So we have 1,760, we have 3, and we have 12. And when we do this conversion, then we have 1 mile. And again, the nice thing about the unit line, we don't really care about the units. We know we want to finish off in inches. We're going to multiply by our first conversion factor, our second, and our third, and we're going to end up with 63,360 inches. If we're going to do this with unit analysis, again, it's the same basic idea. We start where we start, so 1 mile, and we bounce along and use conversion factors to get rid of the units. I don't know one that goes straight from a mile to an inch, but I do know that there's a relationship between miles and yards. So we want to get rid of, and it's set 1,760 to 1. We want to get rid of our miles. So in this particular example, the miles have to be on the bottom, and that's great. But again, what we see is now we have to get rid of yards. We don't want yards, we want inches. And we have a relationship, but again, it's between yards and feet. And again, we can get rid of the yards. And finally, I don't want feet, I want inches. And I do know a nice relationship between feet and inches. So again, unit analysis is this idea of just bashing out units as you go along, canceling units as you're going along. And in the end, you are left with what you want. And in the end, we are left with inches. Okay, let's do one more. How many miles are there in 37 feet? Well, 37 feet is probably the width of our classroom, so that's not many miles. On a unit line, we're going to start with feet, and we're going to go through yards, and we want to finish at miles. So again, here's our start, here's our finish. I don't care about inches because they're on the left side, and we're going to bounce this way. We're going to bounce one more, and the conversion from feet to yards is 3, and yards to miles is 1,760. And when we do our calculation, we're going to start off with 37, and we're going to divide by 3, and we're going to divide by 1,760, and we're going to end up with 0.007 miles. If we were going to do unit analysis, we'd start off with 37 feet. Again, unit analysis, we have to have the units. Start off with 37 feet, and we are going to multiply by a ratio, a factor that gets rid of feet. Well, we have 3 feet in 1 yard, and again, the feet cancel out. But we don't want yards, we want miles. Well, that's great because we do have a relationship that gives us what we want. So in the end, we want miles, and that's what we are left with. When we do this calculation on our calculator, of course, we get the same answer. So notice that the conversion is just like the metric system, except it's not as nice because we have those not nice numbers. Okay, key ideas. I want you guys to put your key ideas down. come up with 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever, and um, look back at your notes the for the metric system and see if they are the same. And we'll take these up in class first thing.